Factions exist in every land. In the US, the biggest factions are collectively known as the left or the right, or sometimes the Democrats or Republicans. Each of these groups is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller groups that each have their own interests and desires. Funny thing is, in the modern world we inhabit, we are more connected than ever, and yet our tribalistic instincts bring us to hatred for other groups. The very internet that brings us together has allowed us to create for each of our own selves an echo chamber of our own making. We surround ourselves with only people that are like us and believe like us, and then we are thoroughly confused when we find out that our side doesn't win elections. Sometimes reality crashes in on the party and we realize that everyone agrees with me because I never hear people saying otherwise. It's just because we have surrounded ourselves with like-minded people. Tribalism isn't totally bad. We all need peer groups. The great thing about the internet is you can create a tribe of your own liking. But too often, we forget to stay connected with the wider world, and therefore we stop empathizing with people who think, feel, act, or believe differently. In 2018, Amy Chua, a law school professor at Yale Law School, published Political Tribes, Group Instinct, and the Fate of Nations. Here's my review. Now, of course, I'm doing a book review on a book that's 5 years old, but I think it's still relevant for today. The central thesis of her book is that much of the politics that occur on a national and global level is shaped by the tribal beliefs in politics at the local level. At our very basic level, we humans protect first ourselves, then our families, and then our tribes. In ancient times, this made a lot of sense because our tribes were the people immediately around us. They were the people we lived with our whole lives. In the book, Amy gives many examples of tribes in various parts of the world and discusses their history, and then also how naively and stupidly American policymakers have been blind to politics, tribal politics. One of the most potent examples was the discussion of Vietnam and Afghanistan. In both places, America spent enormously in both money and in human capital on military objectives based on a thorough misunderstanding of the driving motivations of the people in those places. In Vietnam, for example, the Americans failed to see how the Vietnamese were largely the poor working class in their own home country, with ethnic Chinese people running all the banks and the businesses. While left alone, this is not necessarily a cause for concern, but it was a deep-seated cause of distrust and tension. Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese Communist Party, ironically, in the 1950s, wanted American help to oust the French colonists so he could help his nation set up an American-style republic. But Americans, often deferring to our historical allies like the French, ignored that entreaty. But when Ho Chi Minh used the Communist Party to fight the French, and the Americans, so focused on the threat of global communism, sided with the more capitalist ethnic Chinese in Saigon, and not even realizing that they were a different tribe and ethnicity from the Vietnamese people. Instead of being seen as fighting alongside them for their freedom, the Vietnamese came to see the American forces as keeping the French and Chinese oppressors in place as their overlords. Afghanistan was similar. As we went in being so focused on fighting global terrorism, Americans sided with the Northern Alliance, which was predominantly a Tajik minority. The dominant ethnic group in Afghanistan, the Pashtun, came to see the Americans as helping their rival tribe who had a history of oppressing the Pashtun. Worse, American policymakers again relied too heavily on an ally, Pakistan, to advise us on how to approach things. Pakistan being run yet by another ethnic tribe that hates the Pashtuns led Americans to engaging in many actions that further alienated the dominant tribe of Afghanistan. The later parts of the book, Amy Chua expounds on the modern tribes of America: the poor white working class, the Black Americans, the Mexican Americans, the LGBT activists, the intersectionalists, the women's rights groups, the WASPs, or white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and many others. In detail, she discusses histories of those various groups and how these interests play into the modern politics. She concludes with an epilogue that aims to trying to encourage outreach between tribal groups to others. The point being is that with increased interaction, often people shed their tribal rivalries, and develop what she describes as a supergroup. A supergroup, like what the United States of America is described as many peoples, many tribes uniting under a common shared belief. It doesn't mean that there aren't still differences and rivalries, but the overarching belief in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is typically a uniting force for the American supergroup. So do I recommend this book? Well, yes, I do. I believe it is worth your time. The audiobook's only about 7 hours long. The historical examples from around the world are by themselves extremely interesting and helpful for people who enjoy learning. The part that's maybe less helpful is the part about American groups, but that's me as an American who already knew about these groups and I already have a deep understanding of them. So that portion of the book was a lot less interesting to me, at least. There were also many parts of the book that you could kind of sense Amy Chua's bias. I felt like she did a really good job of counteracting her own biases and, avoiding being too overly, biased on any one thing. But the great thing was, it was generally a good book with a really good message about coming together. I think it's important for us all to learn how to live together on this world because, frankly, there's a lot of big problems in our world. And it would be really helpful if people could reach across from tribe to tribe and, maybe not want to kill each other, certain global struggles currently happening right now. But in the end, it's a good book. I encourage you to read it. Anyways, thank you. I'm the Colorblind Architect. Peace out.